Thanks, Kathy. So I'm going to talk about mental health in UK Biobank. There are issues for mental health which I don't want to make it sound too different from the rest of medicine, because it's not, but there are some issues which need to be surfaced. Firstly, that most mental disorders we talk about actually have their onset before people in UK Biobank were enrolled. So these are typically disorders which start in adolescence or early adult life. And they're disorders which fluctuate over time. So it's not like getting cancer where you have a single point in time where a cancer is diagnosed. These are disorders, for example, depression, where people might have an episode in their teens, or later in their 20s, and again in their 50s. So one's trying to get something which is longitudinal across a life course in terms of ascertaining those sorts of disorders. Some of our disorders are inherently difficult to get a handle on using a questionnaire. If you imagine someone who has a psychotic disorder, which almost by definition involves a lack of insight into their disorder, they may well be at odds with the treating medical team about what's wrong with them. Routine diagnosis in linked records may be unreliable, and we're going to talk a bit about that a little later on. And when we talk about mental health, we're not talking about a single disorder, we're talking about a multitude of disorders. So, and I'm going to characterize it largely as common disorders which are seen typically, which typically don't present at all, or if they do present, will present to GPs, and more severe disorders which are typically seen in secondary mental health care. There's an issue about participant fatigue in anything you ask participants in a big survey like this to do, no matter how generous people are with their time. But there's an added issue with stigma for mental health problems, where you're asking people inherently sensitive questions. And participation rates affect, mental disorders are affected more by non-participation than many other disorders. So I won't labour this, but this slide demonstrates in a Norwegian cohort where we were able to link a population survey to disability pension awards. And we found out actually the people who didn't participate in the population survey, which had quite a good participation rate, of around 2/3 of the population, the proportion of people with mental disorders, we found out from the disability pension awards, was much lower in the population survey than it should have been. So only about 1/3 of the people with mental disorders actually got into the population survey, despite a 2/3 participation rate. So our strategy for ascertaining mental disorders is two-pronged. For the more severe, less common disorders like psychosis and bipolar affective disorder, we place an emphasis on record linkage. And for the more common disorders like depression and anxiety, we use a lifetime diagnosis from a web-based survey. And the emphasis is for specificity over sensitivity. So in other words, when we're defining someone as having a disorder, we're interested in knowing that they really have got that disorder. And we're less worried about the people we've said haven't got the disorder if they say that if it actually turns out, well, maybe that was borderline, maybe they did, for a short period of time in their early 20s, have an episode of depression. We want to know when we've defined a, inverted commas, case, we're confident that that person really has had the disorder. And the process started a while back. We had a meeting in January 2015, and essentially I think one of the things I'd advise other groups which are thinking about doing this is be inclusive at the onset. So we invited virtually every academic psychiatric department, psychology department in the country, anyone doing mental health research, to participate in a seminar. About 50 people came to a seminar at the Wellcome Trust in January 2015, and over time, a smaller group defined itself who were really interested and prepared to do the heavy lifting. It was an iterative process of consultation and refinement in terms of defining what the questions might be. And we've recently now gained ethics approval for an online survey using in UK Biobank with a questionnaire which is piloted and ready to implement. And I'll just say a little bit about the requirements of the web-based questionnaire. It has to be quick. So remember participant fatigue. We were aiming to get something done in less than 20 minutes. It has to obviously be acceptable to participants. And therefore we did a lot of piloting of the questions using general population samples, but also people with mental disorders. And we have a service user advisory group in the Biomedical Research Centre I run, which is very helpful in terms of giving context and identifying questions which were less acceptable and so forth. And we were wanting to cover the main common mental disorders in the web-based questionnaire, and also some important exposures. So for mental disorders, the absolutely critical exposures are often ones which took place a long time early in life, and we got some context about people's experiences of parenting and so forth, like that. So the idea is to give lifetime diagnoses rather than actually just current diagnoses, and we also wanted to be consistent with other major psychiatric surveys. For example, the International Psychiatric Genomics Consortium, we wanted to make sure that our measures were in parallel with theirs. So this is the content of the web-based questionnaire, which can be delivered in less than 20 minutes. We start off with some lifetime screening questions about whether you've ever had mental disorders, ever had problems which have taken you to a doctor or a psychologist. We then ask questions about current symptoms of depression before diving deeper into a lifetime schedule of depressive symptoms using something called the CIDI short form. This is a World Health Organization developed questionnaire which has been used on web-based platforms before. We have a brief screen for mania, so to be able to identify people with possible bipolar disorder, measures of anxiety, and then we look at, in a little bit of depth at addiction, because clearly lifetime addiction is a very important risk factor as well as outcome, and we use the World Health Organization's audit questionnaire to look at alcohol use, consumption and use patterns. We look at cannabis and then do a short screen for psychotic symptoms, and also looking at traumatic events in childhood and also more recently before looking at post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms and self-harm. So this is a lot of different topics covered in a short space of time. This is what the questionnaire is going to look like. I'm very grateful to the team in Oxford for getting us to this point. So this is, you won't be able to read it, but it gives you a feel for what the interface will look like. And we called it thoughts and feelings at the top there, and asked people about past experiences of mental health problems such as depression, agoraphobia and so forth. That's another screenshot. Lots of skips in this, so if you answer no to one question, you'll be brought on to the next section of the questionnaire. And this is some pilot data. I was lucky when we were sort of planning this questionnaire to have a colleague who was setting up a study of cognitive aging. And so they had a web-based platform, quite similar to what UK Biobank will be doing. They said, we're interested in having some mental health measures. I said, well, okay, well, let's stick the UK Biobank questionnaire in there. We've done a lot of work on this already. What's it look like? And we found that actually the number of, so we got 14,000 participants who have now done this questionnaire. Actually, it's more than that. It was quite remarkable. In a weekend, with some good publicity, in a weekend, they recruited 13,000 people to this web-based questionnaire. And this is the median, these are the time in minutes it takes to complete the questionnaire. So what you see is a bimodal distribution. Most people do it between 10 and 15 minutes. There's a group of people who take more than an hour. We think that's because they've gone off and made a cup of tea and forgotten about it and come back later. If you take that group out, you find that actually the median time to complete is 15 minutes, and 75% of people did it in under 21 minutes. And only just over 1% of people who opened the questionnaire failed to complete it. So we feel these are fairly compelling results, and the feedback, we had some free text feedback and people were happy with the nature of the questionnaire. So that's the web-based platform we've devised. I'll say a little bit more about the validation work we've been doing on the record linkages, which Kathy alluded to. And I should acknowledge my colleague Katrina Davis, who did nearly all the heavy lifting on this, and was funded by UK Biobank to do this. We're very grateful for the support. So this is essentially getting an idea of the numbers. If you take hospital episode statistics, remember these are the statistics which come back from general hospital from all hospitals in the UK when you have an admission, and these are the numbers of people who've had an episode of, in this case, mood disorders. So 5,000 of the UK Biobank sample have shown up on this system before recruitment, and another, well, about half of that post-recruitment. So you get a sort of idea of that these are common disorders we're dealing with. we were interested in the validity of these questions, of these outcomes, in terms of using the administrative data. So Katrina did a systematic review, and this is a sort of typical systematic review where you start off with a huge pile of papers to get through, and you whittle it down to a more manageable 35 studies, where there'd been some attempt to validate an administrative database with some clinical validation. And what we found is that the answer you get depends a bit on the outcome you're interested in. So if you take the classic psychiatric disorder of schizophrenia, this is the disorder which, in a sense, psychiatric services exist in order to treat and help people with schizophrenia. It's the core work of mental health services, secondary mental health care services in the country. You find that if someone's got a label of schizophrenia in an administrative data set, the median chance from a number of different studies which have looked at it, that they actually have schizophrenia when looked at by a trained psychiatrist doing a systematic clinical interview, is around 75%. So that's the positive predictive value of it being schizophrenia. But schizophrenia is one of a number of different psychotic disorders, and if you group psychotic disorders together, you actually find that the positive predictive value is much better. It's over about 90%. But you find that there are other disorders like some substance use disorders and anxiety disorders which really are quite problematic. So it's giving an idea about where you might be able to use these sorts of statistics and where you shouldn't. And we've taken that a stage further by actually looking at hospital episode statistics and using a system we've developed at the Maudsley called CRIS, which is the Clinical Record Interactive Search, which basically renders our health record system available for a researcher to be able to use it. The point being that you've got non-consenting patient data here, which is de-identified and therefore made acceptable ethically in order to look at it. And you find through this de-identification platform, you can actually then start getting inside the record and understanding what's going on for that individual. And very briefly, what we found was that if you take a disorder like dementia, measured on the hospital episode statistics, and you look at the match of that compared to our hospital records, you find it's very good, it's 94%. If you then look at the structured diagnostic information which is contained in the hospital records, in other words, did the doctor diagnose you with that diagnosis, it's also pretty good. If you compare that to what's actually contained in the full text, if you had all the information available to you, it remains pretty good. And if you combine those different sources, the positive predictive value ends up at 95%. So that's a very high positive predictive value. It gives you high confidence that the administrative data actually is telling you something which is meaningful and important and useful in terms of outcome adjudication. And you find that for most of the disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, not doing quite so well, unipolar depression, which tends to be treated in primary care more than in secondary care, you find these figures going down a little bit, but actually, maintaining a positive predictive value of around above 80%, which we were felt quite heartened by as a result. The problem is how much coverage is there. So you'll notice the numbers of people with dementia is actually very small, and that's because actually it's very unusual for someone with dementia to get admitted to secondary mental health care. Most dementias actually diagnoses are made elsewhere. So we don't think this is a sensible approach to diagnosing dementia in our system, but it certainly would do for the major psychiatric disorders of schizophrenia and bipolar. We haven't been completely comprehensive, and we can't in the time available, the amount of space available to do these things. So the web-based questionnaire doesn't cover anxiety disorders, eating disorders, personality disorders, and so forth. And the record linkages, Kathy alluded to there being other types of linkage. The absolutely critical one for us is going to be primary care, but there's also a national system of psychological therapies called IAPT, Improving Access to Psychological Therapies, and there's a database behind that called IAPTUS, which will be very interesting to link, and also the mental health minimum data set, which gives you more information about people receiving care in the community. But I think that's me done. Thank you very much.